Good?
You're good.
So can anybody tell me what the word revelation, like what it actually translates out to? What it means?
Revelation.
Revelation. Tell me what the word revelation means.
Isn't it
Huh?
like a
Literally almost says it.
Epiphany.
yeah, like a
kind of
Revealing
Epiphany.
something. Revealing
Where did-
something.
You never heard of
Go.
epiphany?
Where do you get epiphany out of revelation?
You know, it's like
You have a
a
revelation,
when you have an
like-
epiphany.
Okay, well, revealing is what I was wanting to get at. So the word,
I was gonna say a great realization.
we can't even get through like the intro. So, the first thing was, like in Greek, the word translates apocalypto. It is where we get the word apocalypse. It's actually a different verb of it. It's apocalypsis, which means to unveil, like pulling the sheet off something. So we get the word apocalypse. But apocalypto is what revelation translate out to. So it's a revelation of who? This is open. So my answer. Revelation of?
Jesus
Revelation
Christ.
of
John,
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
you said that. You said that last week.
Huh?
She's like,
Yeah,
I deserve one.
but look right here. At the start of it, it says the revelation of John the Divine. And then 1:1 says of Jesus Christ. So, a little bit of intro. I think I covered this a little bit last week, but we're going to go back through it. It was written in 96 AD by the Apostle John on the island of Patmos. He was exiled there. This is the only book in the Bible that begins with a blessing and ends with a blessing. Chapter 1, verse 3, and chapter 22, verse 14. Christ says, "Blessed is he that readeth and heareth the words of this prophecy." We're supposed to know this book. Now, why do people not want to read this book?
Because it talks about hell.
Lots of Jesus talks about hell in the gospel a lot.
Oh, well,
scary.
this
Talks
one talks
about
about
the end
lake
of the
of
world.
fire and
Do
like.
what?
Talks about the end
Yeah.
of the world, everything.
It hadn't happened. It's scary.
It's in
How
the
about-
future.
How about people don't understand it?
That too.
But I mean, you know, we've talked about a lot in this class how, could y'all imagine being dropped 2,000 years in the future when you've never even seen a blacktop road and try to describe stuff? Because obviously it was past now. So people want to say, like, you know, the book of Revelation has lots and lots of symbolism. And I'm not saying that it doesn't. I believe that it does. But it's also John trying to describe stuff the best that he could.
We talked about this, like, well, it was everybody in the bus on the way to the rock climbing thing. You remember?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where it was.
And we said that they would probably think that McDonald's was like our place of worship.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of keep that in your head as you read and we go through Revelation. Just think of John trying to describe this. Like, he's literally known a desert with nothing remotely modern. So, try to keep that in your mind as we go through this. I mean, my hat's off to John. I mean, because ain't nobody in this class probably write down and describe how he did. Like, I think he did an amazing job for being a minimum of 2,000 years ago. Well, 1900 and something. I'm not doing math. So, chapter 1. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. I'm going to talk about points. We're going to read a few verses as we go through here. I'm not going to be David Platt, but I'm going to be just a half speed under him. If he's a 2, I'm 1.5 today. So I'm going to talk about key points, bullet points. I'm not explaining anything today. I will briefly explain some stuff, but I'm going to save that for the day that we go over the chapter. I'm just trying to give an overview of what's in each chapter. That's why if anybody wants a piece of paper to write stuff down, do you want a piece of paper?
I don't have a pen.
I have a pen.
Okay, then sure.
I mean, it'll just help you an overview when we start breaking each chapter down.
Okay. I have a real fast question.
Huh?
Real fast question.
What?
Hers says Revelation of Jesus Christ, mine says of St. John. Is that just because he wrote it?
It says St. John.
Mine says Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no. Verse
Verse 1.
Okay, verse 1 says Jesus Christ. Mine says the revelation of St. John the Divine too.
No, I'm talking like the, okay, just makes sense.
The heading.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Mine says, oh, well, never mind, verse 1, we just went over that.
Yeah, verse 1 says it's from Jesus Christ. I'll read it real quick. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass, and he sent to signify it by his angel unto his servant John. Lots of people also have trouble with that when it says it shortly come to pass. It's been a long time since Jesus has been on earth. But I wish that I was a really good Bible student and could tell you the verse, but a day is as 1,000 years. So if you want to think of it that way, and the way God perceives time versus us, it's been 2 days, which is a really short time. To us, 2,000 years is a crazy long time because all we can perceive is 100 years. Does anybody else have a mind that perceives past 100 years? Because you perceive your estimated lifespan is what you perceive time as. Right? Or is anybody else thinking like 300 years in the future, I'm going to have this effect? We don't. So we can't even comprehend time that's already happened. Okay. So, chapter 1. John was told to write these down. Verse 7, Jesus' first glimpse in the book on his return. Verse 9, John says, I, John. Now, I'll read that real quick. I, John, who also am your brother. We would just read over that and it wouldn't really make any sense to us. But like when John says it there, he's going, I, John, me. Like he picked me. Like I got to see this. Like he's not boasting, but he's going, wow. Like I got to see this. He showed this to me. He says that a lot throughout Revelation. John was humble. If you go back to his gospel, he never mentions his name in the Gospel of John. When John is mentioned in the gospel, it's 2 other people. It's John the Baptist, and I forgot the other one. I think it's James's brother of Jesus. I think that's right. But it's not this John. He never mentions his name. John is a humble person. So keep that in mind. He was not boasting. I just said that. Verse 11, write to the 7 churches. 12 through 16, I'm going to read this really quick because it is a description that he gives of Jesus. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me. And being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the floor, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. I have no idea what that means. I've looked that up for y'all. Another translation might be better there. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as flame of fire. And his feet like unto fine brass, as if burned in a furnace. And his voice as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword. And his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. Verse 17, I want y'all to see this, because y'all will hear a lot, especially on the internet. If you go to these huge, big worship churches, people are going to tell you they seen Jesus. Yeah, I know y'all heard videos of people talking about this. John was an apostle. Verse 17, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet dead. Why in the world would people that are in the world right now that supposedly have an encounter with Jesus talk about it like he was a bubbly person that they walked up and hugged, when an apostle of his that walked with him fell at his feet when he seen him again? Anybody want to answer that one? So I'm just saying, think about that when you hear stuff. You hear all these people that want to give an account of that they seen an angel, that they seen all this stuff, but they don't talk about it. You look throughout the whole Bible, these great prophets and apostles and people of the Bible fell down in fear when they seen God, the holiness of God, or Jesus. Just remember that. Chapter 2. I told y'all we're going to sort of fly through all this. Okay, now we're going to look at the 7 churches and see how they relate to today. It's kind of cool. We're going to go through these churches. I'm going to give sort of a brief description of what every church was. And you are going to see every church in America in these 7. Now, a little bit of information that I did not incorporate in here, I don't believe. And I will open this up to the floor. Do you think the churches, how they're mentioned, have any meaning? The order? Dude, I never would have got this. Sean's like, 50-50, yes, no. Anyways, it was the messenger route. The way the churches are listed out in here, you can look on a map. I got a book that I'm going to bring in. Jake seen it last night. And next year it's 100 years old. My granddad actually used it to preach out of. It's kind of really cool. It has the messenger route that would have showed where these churches were in Asia Minor. So it's kind of neat. So, verse 2, Ephesus. We talked a little bit about this last week because that was my question. They had left their first love, Jesus. They were very doctrinally sound, but they had left the spiritual side of worship. They were loveless. We see this now. People, which I guess they still be churches now. This is not going to be your big seeker-sensitive church. This is not going to be one of the mega churches. This is going to be a lot of times smaller churches that hold so tight to doctrine that they don't have love. Younger apologists can be a lot like this. Like they're so sound in doctrine, they'll forget the love side of it. The church of Smyrna, the poor but rich church, the persecuted church. Now, we talked about this last week. What does it mean if you're a persecuted church? You're not going to have false anything in your church. If your church is being persecuted, it's going to weed out false anything itself, right? So this is one of the two churches Jesus didn't condemn or say anything bad about. There's nothing written against this church. The church of Pergamos. Or there's another way to say it. I didn't look into it. This was a heretical church. They had a few members that taught the doctrine of Balaam, false doctrine, and it's the N word in there. It's in verse 6. I ain't trying to pronounce it. Jesus told them to repent or he would fight them with the sword of his mouth. The church of Thyatira, this church of false prophets, Jezebel was teaching false things to the church and getting them to eat food sacrificed to idols. Chapter 3, church of Sardis, the dying church. They were losing faith, but a few... I don't know what I wrote there. But a few were expecting Jesus to come back then and not later. If you remember in the gospel... Are you recording?
No.
Oh.
I just propped it up.
Oh, dude, this one's on YouTube. Okay, do y'all remember in the gospel when the people were expecting Jesus to reign in his kingdom right then? When he was going in Jerusalem, everybody was laying down palm branches, their shirts, and everything. They were expecting Jesus to bring in their kingdom then. Does everybody remember that? This church thought Jesus was coming back then, not later. They actually thought that Jesus was going to overthrow the Roman government, which he didn't. So when he didn't immediately, the people lost faith in that church. The church of Philadelphia, this was the second church he says nothing bad about. They're the loyal church. Philadelphia actually means the city of brotherly love, or I guess this be the church of brotherly love. He says nothing bad about this church. He says he will make people come to worship at their feet. The church of Laodicea, the lukewarm church. This verse should get used more often, I think. The verse in here where it says that Jesus will spew them out of his mouth. Some older translations will say vomit. It's whatever you want to do. Like he doesn't want a hot or cold. He wants hot. He doesn't want lukewarm or cold. There's a lot of churches now, and Jesus says he will spew or vomit them out of his mouth. They depend on their earthly goods over God. So, these are the churches, and can y'all sort of see how these are relevant in times today? How we have all of these churches still? I mean, you have the heretical church. You have the church of false prophets. You have the persecuted church, not really in America. We don't have that here. But you have the doctrinally sound church, then you have the loyal churches. I would say which one do y'all think would be more rampant in our day and age? Which church?
False.
False?
The false, what's the word? Doctrine?
Lukewarm.
False teachers, lukewarm. I lean, I don't know which one I lean towards.
You're going to lean more towards the false one because I said it. And
I would say they would also go together very well too. But I would say those are the two most, but you could actually throw in the heretical church there that teaches that, the universalism theory where everybody's going to go to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot of churches, I'm pretty sure you could take like 5 of these and combine them into the persecuted, and the loyal one probably wouldn't, but. Okay, chapter 4. John called up to see heaven. The elders on the throne, the 4 beasts full of eyes, these were thought to be angels. Sean, not going into this yet.
What?
We will in due time. They said continually, holy, holy, holy. Does anybody remember why they say it 3 times?
Emphasis 3 is key.
You're horrible at raising your hand. Go ahead, Reagan, explain.
It's because it emphasizes the word.
Okay, and then Hebrew culture, they would say a word twice for emphasis. Verily, verily. Anybody else got some examples?
Muchly, much.
What?
I said muchly, muchly. Stay focused.
Oh, man.
Don't listen
How am I
to
supposed to stay focused with muchly, muchly? So when they said holy, 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 it took it to like the third plane. He would say verily, verily, if they had something they wanted to emphasize, like a really bad pit was my example I used instead of saying, yeah, they would say a pit, not instead of, like it was a tar pit or a deep pit, it was a pit. I mean, bad pit. So when they said holy, 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 it was taking it to the third level on that. We talked about how we still use that language today. Like, are you cool? Are you cool? We emphasize words twice to make a point.
Cool.
That was yours?
Amos, Amos.
Cool, are you?
It got his attention.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like, are you like that?
That's one way to get some attention,
No one says that.
actually.
The only thing
What?
I say is, am I right or am I right? I mean, that's
You
not
say
really
it
it, but I
twice.
mean.
Okay. They and the elders continually worship God. Remember this point because here in a minute we're going to talk about something else. Heaven is seen throughout Revelation as being loud. Kind of like Silent Night, like we're going to talk about closer to Christmas. It wasn't silent. Heaven's not quiet. Somebody's continually worshiping.
Singing.
Always praising, worshiping. Chapter 5. The book with the seven, or the scroll with the seven seals. Another question open for discussion. Why would they seal it 7 times?
Make sure no one can get in it.
Because they had the ring that they put the seal on, and then if they sealed it so it wouldn't rub off, and people couldn't take it off and be like, oh, well, it's not real.
That's a signet ring, and that's true, but why would they do it 7 times?
Emphasis.
Raise your hand! Yes, Reagan!
7 is the number of completion.
No, go ahead and say yours because it's right.
Emphasis.
Sort of, you're wrong.
You said it was right.
I just want you to make me feel good for a second. So, little background. Roman
So wait,
culture.
an emphasis?
No, I'm going to explain it. Roman culture, if they sealed something 7 times, they did it so nobody could tamper it. They did it with a signet ring. They would stamp the wax, roll it up. When they got to a certain point, they would stamp the wax, roll it up. Now, something that was sealed 7 times was most of the time a will or a deed. So we're going to see in a minute, there's only one person in heaven that can take this scroll, which will be a will or a deed to the title of, not the church, Earth.
Is that right?
That's right. See, sometimes I don't say why, I just say you're right. Or sometimes I tell you you're right, and then I'm just lying.
Crush your dream.
So this is the book with the 7 seals. No one could tamper with it if it had 7 seals. Only the Lion of the tribe of Judah could open it. Or he's also called the slain lamb. Verse 13 shows all of creation worshiping. And I'm just going to read that real quick, but I got to keep flipping. And every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them heard I saying, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne and upon the Lamb forever and ever. The entire creation will worship. So, chapter 6. The 6 seals are going to be opened here. Now, these are the horsemen of the
6
apocalypse.
6.
Calm down. In this chapter, the 6 seals are going to be opened. The 7th will be opened later. There's 7 seals.
Gotta be. Yeah.
So you're in chapter 6.
I'm on chapter 6.
Seal.
Six individual seals will be opened in chapter 6.
There you go. Explain it better.
There we go. So, these are the horsemen of the apocalypse. I'm not going to explain what their colors mean and what they are. Well, I briefly am.
Well, there's
Briefly. Just listen, Sean. Be happy. The 6 seals in order. Number 1, the rider of the white horse, the conqueror. Seal 2 is the red horse, war. 3 is the black horse, which is famine. 4 is the pale horse, death and hell followed with him. Power over a quarter of the earth. Do I need to repeat those for people that are writing them down?
It's not
Yeah.
pestilence.
Did you say there were
I don't know how
7?
to spell
I thought the white horse
seven.
was
I
right.
spell famine, so.
Right.
What does pestilence mean?
pest.
Grasshoppers.
No! What do I need to re-say?
It is passwords, so.
Start with the white.
Okay, number one, the rider of the white horse, the conqueror.
Yeah.
Red horse, number 2, war. Black horse, number 3, famine. 4 is the pale horse. It says death and hell followed with him. And he was given a power over a quarter of the earth.
Wait, so what was his name?
The pale horse.
Weird.
So
The rider's name was Death.
Wow.
Okay.
Let's see if I can scan through that real quick. As verse 8, and I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto him over a fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beast of the earth.
I got a question.
How do you kill
About
that? Oh, sorry.
If you're an angel of death.
I got a question about death. Is death like, well, that death, is that like a literal sense of like Grim Reaper or?
I've never seen a Grim Reaper in the Bible.
I've heard people, no, hear me out. I've heard people call the Grim Reaper death, and I'm wondering if that's what it
It's
means.
called the Angel of Death. I think this is an angel.
It's the angel of death. Yeah.
So they
what-
are, these guys are like
Fine.
angels.
These are sent from heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
So, 5th seal, the martyrs that cry for vengeance, they are told to wait until all the martyrs are finished on earth. We get a glimpse of God's omniscience here. They're crying for God to pour out his wrath, and he says, wait a little longer, get your white robes, so on and so forth. We'll-
Hold your horses.
So wait, what's the name of it?
Oh, that was terrible.
What was the name of it?
The fourth horse.
There's no 5th horse.
Like,
It's all the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
I thought you said fifth, something, something, something.
The 5th seal was
Oh.
open.
Gotcha.
Why is no one saying
So
that?
it's not black and
I don't.
I had this
The 6th seal is a great cosmic cataclysm. You will have earthquakes, the sun goes black, the moon to blood, stars fall, heaven rolls up like a scroll, mountains move. The men of the earth that are not part of God's kingdom will wish for mountains to fall on them to hide them from the sight of the Lord. We'll dive into that more later because there's a lot there. Chapter 7. We've talked about this a lot in this class. 4 angels holding back the 4 winds. What are winds a sign of in ancient culture? We've talked about this.
That's the one with
I was gonna say something
No,
else.
it ain't a storm we're coming.
It makes sense.
Winds are seen as destructive forces back then. The 4 angels holding back the 4 winds would be what?
End of all day. The 4 horsemen of the.
4 quarters.
Cardinal directions.
Yeah.
North,
All
south.
set.
You know, I never
South,
understood
yeah.
those.
Huh? What? East.
Okay.
Okay, Mallory's going to answer this one. 144,000 Jews to be sealed. What tribe is not mentioned?
I remember, I just can't remember the name.
Ooh.
No, I remember like it's something with like
Does it
a.
start with a J?
Go to college and tell them that. I know the answer, I just don't know exactly what it is.
Right now.
Does it start with J?
Huh?
No, I remember we
I
talked
don't
about it.
remember it.
Tribe of Dan.
Damn.
Oh,
Now,
Dan the man.
they're not included. Everybody calm down. They're not included in the 144,000 here because of gross idolatry in Deuteronomy. May have messed that up. Not sure. But in Ezekiel, we see them in the kingdom of heaven. So it would be a good thing for y'all to sort of skim through Ezekiel, the latter part of Ezekiel, and the book of Daniel before we start studying Revelations. It'll help you tie everything together. Verse 9 in chapter 7. I'm having a hard time flipping here. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hand. Verse 9 is us. We're not Jewish. We're not in the 144,000 like the Jehovah's Witnesses think they are, or could be. So verse 9 is the church, us, not Jews. Verse 9 says, he saw a number too high to count of all peoples, not just Jews, before the throne of the Lord. They all had white robes. All the saved from the tribulation are seen at the end of the chapter who wash their robes in the blood of the Lamb. Chapter 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, here's the seventh seal. When he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Now, this goes back to what I told y'all. Remember everybody praising and holy, 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 and everybody falling on their face and everybody worshiping. If there's that much worshiping going on, if it gets quiet for half an hour, like, it's got to be something, something about to happen. I heard a joke, it's kind of funny, so I'll go ahead and tell y'all.
Oh, boy.
They said because of this, this is a Brett joke. If Brett was preaching on this, I guarantee you'd say it. They said because of the verse in verse 1 that there's no women in heaven because it was quiet for half an hour.
I knew that was coming. I knew it was gonna be it.
I thought it was funny. I'm gonna be nice right now.
You're in trouble.
All this time there has been glorious noise of praising, but then silence. Verse 5, an angel cast fire from the altar upon the earth. Does anybody else remember in Scripture where it talks about the altar or the fire from the altar? Anybody? What is fire you talked about? What were you going to say? What is fire used for in the Bible?
Distraction.
Come on, preacher son. What's fire used for in the Bible?
Destruction.
What's fire used for in the Bible?
Warm.
Don't say it twice. It doesn't mean it's a pit. It's not Hebrew language.
She's giving it emphasis.
You say it 3 times, it's still wrong. What about purification?
Ah.
What purifies gold?
Fire.
Fire. Isaiah 6.
You have to
An angel takes tongs from the altar of fire and he touches Isaiah's lips with a coal to purify his lips because he's in the presence of the Lord. That's where else this altar is talked about. This angel scoops up a bowl out of that altar and pours it on the earth.
Cool.
Fire is made for purification plus destruction. But a lot of times, but the main
Moment of realization.
emphasis is that something is tried by fire and purified. Because all throughout the Old Testament and the Psalms it talks about gold and silver being purified by fire. So
in this case, is it talking about purification? Because it does say, and there were voices and
Death.
thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes, so I think it was the word destruction in this sense.
okay,
So we were right.
but what does destruction create?
Depends on how much destruction.
It's like wipes away everything.
If you have a
Wipes
field,
it clean.
if you have a field full of weeds, farmers do this all the time. They will burn the field. It purifies the field.
They do control burning and
Huh?
and multiple.
Destroying the weeds.
I'm not calling people
I
weeds.
said,
They're called chaff and tares, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I will obviously when I get to that point read a lot more into it from different people, but from the person I've listened to, or the 2 people I've listened to on this, from what I've took from it, you can ask your father and let me know. Tell him that I said it. Maybe he won't send you a book on it.
I know, man.
He sent his dad a question last night during men's Bible group. Like it was a simple question. His dad sent back like a whole paragraph. He was like, "Does that help?" I was like, "Yeah, that clears it all up actually." All right. So judgment on the earth. We have 7 trumpets. Has everybody noticed the significant number throughout this?
3.
7.
That's my lucky number. Like
There it is. 3.5 is a big number throughout this.
It's also
Hey.
half of 7.
3.5.
oh, yeah.
He's like,
I just learned something in that.
okay, man, we've got to hurry up. Okay, so judgments on earth, each trumpet. I'm going to mention each trumpet and what follows. I will try to say it slow so y'all can write this down.
Exactly how many weeks are we gonna be on Revelation?
I don't know.
16?
Weeks?
No, it's 22.
doing it until everyone
But
understands.
how, we're going through it so quick.
He's doing the overview.
This is an overview. I'm going to break down each step.
Oh, Lord, okay.
It's like, I just know I wrote down a bunch of stuff and don't know nothing.
Exactly. Thank
So,
you, oh, Lord.
First trumpet, hail, fire, and blood. 1/3 of the trees and all the grass burn up. I want y'all to think as we go through this, what would this do to earth?
Well,
1/3 of the grass and trees burn up. Be a judgment on vegetation. What would that do to oxygen?
Be gone.
That's what I was fixing to say.
Terrifying.
Good deal.
I'm glad.
Second one, a great mountain cast into the sea and it became blood. Now, this is where you see John describing stuff, and to put it in our terms, I'm going to give you a quick scenario. What would represent a great mountain falling from the sky to be cast into the sea?
Asteroid.
Asteroid.
A great mountain cast into the sea and what?
Became
What would-
blood.
And became blood.
it's
So,
fire.
You
An
got the-
asteroid, huh?
I said you got the air taken away, and then you got the water taken away.
Okay, now, but the blood thing is what I want to touch on real quick.
Is that just-
There's lots of different scientific things that could show why an asteroid and the gases surrounding the asteroid could cause red tide in the ocean, which is the killing off of thousands and millions of microorganisms in the water.
Have you seen those pink lakes in like Australia, and then like the red lakes, and then like the?
I feel like I have, but not recently.
There's a place in Spain that throughout history has had several different.
I actually want to talk to you about it after class. I'm ordering something you might want to read.
What?
It's like a 1840 books, a set of books on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire.
There you go.
Pretty cool. Why is it just me?
I'm not being,
Everyone
I'm not
loves
being.
You always talk about Roman Empire with me.
It's pretty cool.
That was-
So, third trumpet, great star from heaven, wormwood, 1/3 of the waters in the world poison. This would be the judgment on waters.
Great star.
And it says a great star fell from heaven.
What's wormwood?
It was a
Wormwood.
plant or a wood. I don't really know. I have to research this. I'm not gonna give
Isn't
you.
it? It's kind of like cork. It's real porous or something like that.
Yeah, but it poisons water,
Uh,
makes it undrinkable. What?
Third of the water's going.
Also,
Yep. Fourth trumpet.
No, it's
Okay, this is where you're gonna get into really screwing up stuff on earth. I mean, obviously, everything would be pretty bad now as it is, but fourth trumpet blown, 1/3 of the sun smitten, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars. What would happen if you take away 1/3 of the sun?
we'd be dead.
Yeah, it'd be too cold.
What about calendar? What about time?
Oh, no.
What
I
about,
don't care about that.
We'd already be dead.
you would.
I know, we would already be dead.
Well, we
before
already
that.
have time
Blocked
telling
out.
machines.
So it's like blocked out.
1/3 of the sun, he says 1/3 of the sun smitten. Do what?
I just put it on.
So if you take away 1/3 of the moon, you start messing with tides and oceans and everything coming in and out.
And we're-
Stars, I'm not an astrologist, so I don't really know what that would do.
The sky won't be as pretty or something.
Yeah.
You might get closer to counting them then.
There you
You won't be
go.
able to see all the fireflies.
So after this, after 4 trumpets, you have an angel. Does anybody's, let me see what verse it is.
I've lost where we're, okay, never mind.
We're in chapter 8. Verse 13, does anybody say an eagle?
So-
And I beheld and heard an eagle?
Yes.
Chapter 8, verse
Mine
13.
says-
No, mine says angel.
Angels.
Who says eagle?
Mine.
What translation?
Mine says
Wait, what chapter?
Holy
NLT,
NIV.
NIV, okay.
Neo.
What
There's
chapter?
emphasis in this verse. It
Wait a
says,
minute.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Chapter,
13.
Chapter 8, verse 13.
Oh.
Chapter 8, verse.
I just thought it was kind of, neat that some say eagle, some say angel. I don't know what the
Mine
mix of
says-
it
I can see how it could say eagle though.
Eagle flying through the air, angel flying through the air, and just, you know.
is. Yeah.
Why
Okay.
does it say
oh,
But what the
NIV
angel, what?
says eagle,
Yeah.
but
That's what he's
in,
got.
but New King James
Why does it
says
say eagle
angel.
though?
That's interesting.
King James says angel. Do what?
Why does it
So,
say-
verse 13. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe. 3 times. Lots of
Whoa!
I didn't really want to yell
So
it.
much
So,
destruction. You just-
to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpets, the 3 angels which are yet to sound. So obviously, the next 3 trumpets are going to be a lot worse.
Wow.
They're a lot more emphasized.
The locust from the bottom